Hey everybody, my name is Jeremy, this is Red Beans Recording, and today we're back looking at the Tempera. This is an 8-part granular sampler. You can do the classic granular mush stuff, or you can do this cool rhythmic remix stuff like we're doing right now. It has 8 slots for samples, and each sample has 8 positions, which are accessed by touching the sample slot vertically. I'm going to be going through the new firmware, some of the notable features, as well as showing off some of these canvases that I've made that are a bit more remix heavy. I'm going to be making these canvases available, so check the video description for links to that. Alright, cool. There are chapter markers if you want to jump around, but otherwise, let's start to dig into some of the new fun stuff in the Tempera. Oh, and by the way, I am recording the VO for this after the video's been edited. I have an absolutely terrible cold, so I'm coughing up a storm. So if my hand gestures and my voice don't match up, that's what's going on. So this is building off a canvas that I made. The programs for these things with all the samples is called a canvas of jungle breaks, like 170 BPM jungle breaks. And this was really fun. You can auto chop these things as you move through. Each cell has a little slice of them, and there's 8 different slices. But the creator of this, the company Beetle Crab, reached out and was like, hey, you can use BPM mode. If you go to your sample here, you can see that we have tune or to BPM. So if you bring stuff in that is set to a pitch, like it's tuned material only, then you'll probably want to use tune mode and make sure that this reflects the root note of the material that you're using. However, if you want this to sync to the beat and stay in sync as you change tempo, then you're going to want to use BPM mode. So you can hear that it's repitching as we change the tempo. And that's great, especially for this kind of thing. We can bring these breakbeats down to like their original pitch if we want to. But when we turn this back up, it will be in perfect sync once again, which is pretty cool. So that's BPM mode for the samples. The other thing I want to show you is something I was personally confused about with the Tempera, and that is how to get an LFO to actually kind of play the beginning of a cell as it passes through it, as opposed to sort of the middle of it. So we're going to go ahead and assign an LFO to the Y axis of our emitter, which is the sample slice in this case, and turn it up and slow it down a bit. So now when I press a key, we're going to see that it's moving through that path right there. Turn this down just a little bit. But it's kind of like a little messy. Well, if we go into the emitter here and align the spray there with Y, it's going to always play at the beginning of one of those cells, which means that we can sort of auto chop this stuff, which is really, really cool. Okay, cool. Let's have a little jam. All right, in this one, I'm just going to show off, again, this sort of remixing concept where I've loaded up stems that I made. and they're all aligned to the tempo and everything, and I can kind of play chunks of them
to the rhythm roll out, to the rhythm roll out
on the fly.
To the rhythm roll out.
Okay, so we've been focusing a lot on rhythmic stuff, but one of my favorite things about Granular, and I think a lot of people think of Granular in this way, can it do, those mushy sort of like, pad soundscape kind of things? And yes, absolutely it can. That's great at that. You get about 11 seconds per sample. So every, vertical column is a sample, and 11 seconds isn't a ton. And especially if you want longer sort of like soundscapes. So what I did was I recorded at 70 BPM, like 8 different drones on each cell, on each sort of vertical column. Each cell represents a different drone. And then I sped them up and pitched them up really, really fast. And then I slowed them down again in the Tempera. So it's that old school sort of like getting the most out of your sample memory by speeding things up, pitching them up, and then slowing them down again in the sampler. And as you can hear, it sounds pretty good. I will say one thing to note about this particular way of doing things, because in order to get things to really match up, I used BPM concepts, a certain BPM ratio. And when you use the BPM setting for your samples as opposed to the tune setting, you don't get access to this tune spread thing, which we'll talk a little about later in more depth. Tune spread spreads the tuning of the grains every time one is emitted, and in the new 2.0 firmware, you can spread those in fifths, octaves, or fifths and octaves. When you're using the BPM mode, you don't get access to that, which kind of makes sense. It's meant to be BPM locked, not have variable tuning. So keep that in mind when you're using different methods of importing and playing with your samples in the Tempera. Go ahead and turn the microcosm down real quick. You can hear that it's doing a fair amount to the signal. Whenever I do drone or mushy kind of like ambient stuff where I want a really nice, beautiful wash, I'm going to use Mosaic 4 on the microcosm. It is perfect for that. So this is what it sounds like dry, and I'll bring this in. You can hear what it sounds like with some microcosm on it. I think there are a lot of applications with this method here for live sound, theater, stage. You can create complex palettes of sound, these canvases, and play them back while the action on stage is happening, and create real-time music paintings. Okay, this is to show that in version 2.0 of the firmware, we can now change the colors of our emitters. Each one of these little squares that you see is one of the emitters, and you can see how they are the same color as the knobs on top. So each emitter can have its own custom color. So you can see I can change the hue, and I can also change the sort of strength right there. So, Beetle Crab Herd, the maker of this herd that people were having some issues with, maybe color blindness or whatever, that has now been addressed. Okay, now we're going to play around with the newer version of tune spread. Like I said previously, tune spread is where you can increase the variation of pitches based on the grain emission. So here's a basic sound right here. Let me turn up. There, hear that warbling? That's unquantized tune spread. This is fifth. None. Unquantized. Fifth. You can also do fifth and octave. And octave. With a heavy grain density, we're going to hear it happen a lot faster and less rhythmic. But with these rhythmic emitters, it will be on every rhythmic grain that's generated. So this is unquantized. And let's go to fifth. You hear it snap right into a tonal sort of like center there. And there's octave. Yeah, so hey, it's nice to have that option between fifth and octave and both at the same time. This is another new reel that I made specifically for this video, and it is a simpler drone machine. All right, in this demo, I want to show you how the new firmware 2.0 scrubbing works. Grain scrubbing, X and Y. What does that mean? Well, each one of these up and downs is a sample. So 8 samples, you can see those here, 8 samples. And then as we go down like this, or up like this, we move through the sample that's loaded on there. Depending on your grain settings, obviously you're going to get a different experience. In this case, I have a lot of small grains happening very quickly, and they kind of build up, and you hear this like classic granular sort of smushy scanning sound. With XY grain scrubbing, what we get to do is move in between these cells here. So check this out. If I go into the emitters and I pick the one I'm messing with, and I find the thing that says relative X and relative Y, I'm going to use X first. X is through different samples, so check this out. And here we're moving through those different samples now. And there is through that sample right there. I'm still holding down this key. In fact, if I hold down that key, I'll get two relatives. Now, this is cool in so many different ways. Not least of which, excuse me, is just the ability to make these really cool soundscapes as you scrub through different parts of these samples, discovering the insides of them. And if you need to go back, just hit reset. Thank you, Microcosm. Let's try that again with this synthetic voice canvas that I've made. And finally, let's try it out with this beautiful sort of... I don't even know how to describe this. Just scrubbing through the relative grains. Got a little bit of LFO on the spray there. Just having it move up and down a bit as we pass through here. This thing is a soundscape machine. Jesus. I could do that for 20 minutes. I could do a whole video of just that patch right there. But we got other things we need to talk about. So, let's move on. Thank you, Microcosm. Okay, one more jam for you. Just a little outro fun time. Again, that sort of remix concept. Check the video description for links to these, by the way. There's been an improved onboard keyboard. The reverb has been upgraded, which is great. Better modulator visualization. The MIDI clock has been stabilized and made more reliable. You can also quick save your canvases, which is really, really, really great. And there's a shortcut for editing your emitters. The delay effect has been upgraded. There's now a dot value for it, for those classic like dotted eighth delays, which is really, really awesome. The amount of modulators has gone from 5 per voice to 10 per voice, which is really, really fantastic. There's a per emitter effects send level, which is also great. And finally, a micro SD card USB bridge, where you can now bridge the micro SD card contents over USB to a computer. I think the Tempera is something truly unique and special, and I'm very, very happy every single time I get a chance to work with it. Thank you so much to Beetlecrab for sponsoring this video, the makers of the Tempera. I'm going to go ahead and let this play out. My name is Jeremy. This is Red Muse Recording. I'll see you in the next video, and I hope you have a wonderful day.